Hi everyone. This is about my Cummins Dodge 1993 and the worst short circuit I've ever had in my many decades of working on vehicles. This is a fusible link. The wire let out a whole lot of smoke like you can't believe from under the hood, and you can see some of that, the traces of that. It's all dark and blackened on the inside of the insulation, and so is the copper. Now the other giveaway is, if you watch this, you see how stretchy this is? This insulation's amazing. It's super high temperature, and Mopars have had fusible links in them for, God, I don't even know, decades and decades. So, since before I was born. So, that's one of the ways you can tell it's been toasted. Because when this was still connected in the circuit, it looked like every other wire. I couldn't tell. I don't know if you can see the puncture marks. I would stick the probe over here. I used a couple different probes. I used a test light and I used a voltmeter, and I would probe it, and a lot of the times you couldn't find any continuity. So stretching it, I found out, was a good giveaway. Even in circuit you can still stretch it. So what I wanted to do today is try to do a complete reveal without cutting myself in half. Trying to cut this all the way down the line to show you what happens to a fusible link that's been used up. I was in the parking lot of a new restaurant here in town, and I was backed out of my spot 5 feet, and all of a sudden massive amount of smoke came out from the left side of the hood. I mean, huge cloud, and I scrambled outside, popped the hood, and by the time I got the hood open, the smoke was gone. The smell was not, however, but the smoke was. Yeah, see, this is... Let's try this. So here's a chunk of completely cooked and burnt copper wire. And it does melt into segments, so it's not continuous, which, you know, you could guess would be the case. The thing about fusible links is they're rated incredibly high amperage. Now this is only 20 gauge wire, right? A lot of you guys run speaker wire that's 18 gauge. This is 20 gauge, it's smaller. See, now there's no wire left in it. That's all that I could find out of this whole thing. It's just turned black and just melted. And this insulation is just amazing. It's just crazy. I don't know what it's made of. Chrysler's schematics calls it a hypalon wire. I don't know what that refers to because I don't know that term from the industries I've worked in, but okay. So anyway, that's what it looks like. A fusible link cut open. It's just, look at that. It's just pitch black in there, and it didn't melt the insulation anywhere. Not anywhere. So that prevents it from causing a fire. So if this thing, the way it burned, was exposed to other wires, it would start a chain reaction and burn things. These don't. They don't do it at all, and I've not had this experience ever in the 4-point-something decades I've been working on Mopars. So this is my first failure, and it was due to a short circuit. It wasn't the fusible link didn't have a problem. It was a short that I almost narrowed down, and I'll show you that here. In fact, I'll just show you right now. Alright, here we are into the hood of the Dodge. Let's see, I'll show you what I've done to replace the fusible link up to this point. Here's a 10 gauge wire, and you can see the it's an auto resettable breaker. It will trip if it gets too much current through it. It's rated for 40 amps, and then it will reset itself automatically. So the reason I went with that instead of, say, replace the fusible link or any number of other solutions is because I still haven't found the short. Now, this wire, I'll try and show you as delicately as I can. You can see the wire here. It was just a little long, so I gave it a little curl. It goes into this huge harness here. See this big harness right here? It goes into that harness and it follows along until it comes. Now this is going to be the hard part to show you, but I think it's absolutely necessary. Okay, here we go, trying to show detail. You see that gray connector back there with the wires going in it? It also hasn't coming out. And a little higher up and to the left is a black connector. And on the schematics from Chrysler, from Dodge, it'll say black connector, and it actually says dark gray. So whatever you feel that color is, they call it dark gray. And they call this one black. Now, I followed the short from that harness over and down. You see there's an orange and a purple bundle of wires right there. I followed it down to that, which is the top of the black connector. I followed it that far. I got just below the connector and I bumped the harness while I was trying to put my clamp around it, and suddenly the short circuit disappeared. Now, it was a hell of a short circuit. It was pulling between 100 and 300 amps. That's a short circuit, and there was no smoke or anything coming from anywhere else. So that's what I was up against at the time. Now, the truck runs right now. I've driven it 5 blocks down and 5 blocks back, and it didn't short again. But you have to expect that it's going to. You have to expect that. Okay, so the other position is right. See the bundle of wires? They're bare and they're right there in the middle of the frame. I got the clamp on that and then went down further to the black connector, and that's what I found. That's as far as I got. Here is my clamp. My God, I've had this thing for a long time. It has a 400 amp range and a 1000 amp range. And yeah, ironically, on the 400 amp range, it's still pretty accurate down to an amp. I didn't expect that, but here's my old 83. Set it to millivolts and it works great. It takes a little bit of time for this thing to center itself. So you turn it on, you let it sit for a couple minutes, and then you can set the zero. It doesn't have an auto zero like modern ones do where you just hit a button, but it's a piece of cake to use. Anyway, so I'm still hunting for the short. I don't know where it's at. I know approximately where it's leading to, but I haven't found anything, and it won't come back. I can't make it short again. Excuse me. So here's other things I've done in the meantime, just to try and upgrade this thing a little bit. I like factory stuff. I always have, I always will. A lot of guys are chopping these off and putting in various different terminal blocks and ends and stuff, and I'm not going to do that until I'm forced to at gunpoint. So what I've done is I took my my battery tool that has a cutter on it, and I put it in there, and then I also used a wire brush to clean it up good. And then you can see here, I used my solder gun, which with a thermocouple says it'll do 800 degrees. So that's plenty hot to melt lead. Pure lead melts somewhere between 6¼ and 700 degrees, and that's a big chunk of lead. So I used, I can't remember, it was either 40/60 or 60/40 solder here, and I guess not on the bottom of this one. Anyway, so it strengthened. It was all cracked and broken and falling apart in here, and then adding a washer. Well, first let me tell you about the nut. You guys have all seen the nut like this with a shoulder on it. The problem is it digs a big hole in the lead over the years and damages the lead. So I put a washer on it, and it squeezes this end piece very uniformly so it won't crack right away. You know, so this truck is a 93, so it's what, 28, 29 years old, and it's held up great, and it will keep holding up great if I have anything to say about it. So I tried that. I didn't have, you know, years ago I thought I had some silver solder. 2% silver solder is twice as strong as the lead solders, 40/60 and 60/40, but I didn't have any, so I used what I had. And it takes a little bit of temperature to melt this lead, but I melted it, and it had flux in it, the solder did, and it's awfully stiff and awfully strong. I'm really happy about that. I did the same thing on this end, on the negative terminal. It's hard to see because it's wrenched down, but this one was cracked a little bit. So it's got solder on the top and solder on the bottom, and a washer to spread the load out. These nuts are really effective, but they really dig a hole in the side of your lead terminal, and that's not okay with me. That just increases the ability of it to wear out. So, like I said, you know, these are really good cables. They've lasted a long time, and I'll use my technology that I have to keep it alive. A lot of guys, I've seen guys on videos take brand new, their trucks maybe 10 years old, and they slice these off and put on these other terminals, and yeah, that's not me. I'm a restore guy. I like to keep things as original as humanly possible, and that is why I've done this. So we'll see over time how this lasts. All of it matters. The solder helps put the lead back together, seals the crack up, and then the washer spreads the load over a much greater area, and it does actually clamp the terminal much better. The only problem now is using a brand new bolt. The nut has not much friction to keep it, so I'm going to probably swap these nuts out for nylocks so this won't unscrew itself. Diesels, especially these Cummins, tend to vibrate stuff loose. I've had nuts and bolts all over this truck come loose, and some of them even fall off. So anyway, here's what we're at to get this thing back in line. One of the tests I did is this is the wire that takes the place of the fusible link that blew. The fusible link was right here on this end of the what do they call that? It's either a duck foot or a duck bill. It was on this end. It was an orange 40 amp, and it went up to this joint right here, and it fried. So everything else is fine. So what I've been testing is just connecting this wire to this terminal. So the rest of the truck's off. It's completely disconnected from power because I don't hook this up, and hook this on it and see if I can find it. Well, I still haven't found it, and I've spent a week on this thing, troubleshooting this thing, maybe more than a week now. It's kind of a bummer because I need to drive this thing. We need it for hauling pellet fuel, 2,000 pounds of pellet fuel, and for hauling our trash to the dump. So this truck is definitely needed. So the weather right now is excellent for out here in the desert. It's like 50 degrees, which isn't warm, but it's a lot warmer than the rest of the country. So I've hooked this up, and I've run my clamp over it as far as I can. Now what happens is you guys are familiar with the fuel valve. Can you see it in there? It's got two connectors on it just inside the linkage. When there's power to that, it lets the fuel flow into the injector pump. And I've traced a 1 amp draw to that thing, which it measures 10 ohms, so 10 ohms and 12 volts is roughly an amp, but that doesn't account for the 3 to 5 amps that the rest of this system is pulling. So I have to uncover where else the draw is. You'd think 5 amps would be a lot for a truck that's not even running, but maybe there's 5 amps worth of stuff on. I don't know for sure. The other thing that happened that's slightly different is the excuse me. You guys know the voltmeter, right? You're all very familiar with them. I don't know if I can get in close enough to show you. But if you look, there's the 8 volt mark, and then there's another mark, and then there's another mark. The third mark, just to the right of it, almost at the top, you'll see a tiny dot. You see that dot? That's a factory marking for 12 volts, 12.0 volts. And mine used to sit just to the right of that when the battery was fully charged and everything was great. Now it's moved way over, not to the next mark, but just a lot further over, and it didn't used to do that. This battery's brand new. So I charged it. It took about 4 or 5 hours to fully charge, and I don't know why it's running higher voltage. With a voltmeter on the battery, it's 14.5 volts output, which for this era of vehicles is a little on the high side. So did damage occur to the ECM because of this short? It's possible. You know, a lot of people like replacing capacitors on their hardware because they short and they get damaged with time and age. And I've been through all that with tons of electronics, so it might be time to do that. But anyway, so that's where the short circuit troubleshooting is at. I got the truck running, and I, you know, put in all this wiring and all this work. I also tested all those relays with what's it called? A relay buddy. And I was lucky to get one used off of eBay for 20 bucks, and man, let me tell you, it's hugely helpful. Now these Dodge relays, the pins are actually recessed up inside the housing, so you have to buy one of these relay extensions for another 20 bucks. And I've tested all our Jeep relays, I've tested all these, and it's nice to find that everything's functional. It's just for 20 or 40 bucks, it's completely worth your time to test this stuff, because these were all really good quality relays when they were put in new from the factory. So it's good to just be able to test them once in a while, especially when you're, you know, it's 30 years. This thing didn't spend any time in the snow. It's always been in the desert, California desert, Arizona desert. So it's been fairly dry, and things don't tend to corrode. So anyway, years ago, as I mentioned to another YouTuber who's also heavily into Dodges, I disconnected my grid relays a long time ago when I first got the truck. They both came on at the same time, which is close to 300 amp draw, and they weren't supposed to. So I took them apart, cleaned them up, and I got them to work separately just fine, and then I disconnected the power to them. So I don't use them, don't need them. Maybe when this is all done, I'll hook them up again and make sure they do work, but I haven't needed them. We've been in the 20s here a bunch of times, and I can get the truck starts just fine. You can tell it's a little cold, but you rev it just a little bit, clean it out, boom, done. Anyway, so this is what I'm using to try and get this troubleshooting done. This thing's pretty big. I think it's probably 2.5 inches across here in the diameter, inside diameter. And for a big harness like that on the firewall, that's a big deal. I have a smaller one. Actually, I have a couple smaller ones, and I've used them too. But this one's done all the work, and I pulled it out of a box. I haven't used it 10 or 15 years, but it came to be quite useful this time around. So anyway, the other thing that didn't happen is we didn't pop any fuses in the interior. I troubleshot this thing all the way to the interior fuse box, and there was no problems inside. This whole short circuit thing is out here somewhere, and with all the vibrations, you can see all the convoluted tubing is missing. Most of it's missing off of almost all the wiring harnesses, and that's because it gets dry and hot and vibrates, and you know, it just goes away. So I bought a whole package of 3 different sizes of that stuff. So once I get this fixed, I'll put new convoluted tubing on everything. And I bought this cloth electrical tape, is known as friction tape, and I got a roll of that, and I'll do this all up because I need this thing to last. I'll probably be driving this thing until they bury me. Anyway, so that's it. Sorry for being so long. I wanted a lot of detail in this because it's a ton of work. Some guys put in whole new fuse boxes. I did this because I still haven't found the short. The second I find the short and I repair it, I'm putting in a new fusible link and taking this this thing out. I can use it again in the future someday, but I'm a big fusible link fan. They last for decades. They take up no room, and I think they're great. I think they're a great design. So anyway, we'll see what happens. Thanks for your tolerance, and it's cold out, so my sinuses are running. I apologize for all the coughing and sniffing. It's not anything I can help. Anyway, that's it for now. Thanks. See you next time. Alright, a tiny bit of bonus footage if you've not lost your mind with boredom. This is a Relay Buddy number 190. It's old and greasy because I got it used off of Facebook Marketplace, and I'm really happy to have it. For Dodges, you need this extension because the Dodges have a shroud on them. You can't just plug it in the top here. But you plug this thing in, you hit it, and you hit the start button, and it checks it 10 times in a row, and then it comes on with a green light if it passes and a red light if it doesn't. Love it, love it, love it. This cost me 20 and 20, that's 40. These are about 50-something dollars new. Still worth it. They'll last you years. You can test almost any relay you've got, especially if you drive old stuff like I do. Very much worth it. I've tested, I don't even know how many relays. We tested like 10 relays in our Jeeps, and one of them sounds funny. It works, but it sounds funny. So all the Dodge relays passed with great success. The other bonus footage is for the future. That's the lower hinge, and it looks like somebody tried to weld it together with a torch. That's my guess. And it needs to be fixed. So coming up here in the next, probably by summertime, I will have bought probably a MIG welder. I really like TIG. I haven't done either one in many years, but you know, I'll get what I get and then I'll fix this damn thing. I don't know if anybody else has had this. This truck doesn't have any rust on it. So I don't know what happened here, but it looks like somebody tried to use a gas welder and they overheated everything and it rusted, and it's just coming apart. And it's hard on the truck to have a hinge like this. It's a big load on the top hinge and the rest of the assembly. So that needs to get fixed, and it will. And that's it for this video. See you, bye.